need you to understand something before I tell you this story. When your child looks at you with hatred so pure it feels like a physical blow, you never forget it. You carry it in your chest like a stone. For 20 years I carried that stone. And then 3 months ago, my phone rang at 2 in the morning, and I heard a voice I'd spent 2 decades trying to forget say one word. Mother. Not mom. Not even my name Margaret. Just mother. Formal. Desperate. Terrified. I should have hung up. God knows I'd earned that right. But I didn't. And what happened next broke me open in ways I didn't think were possible anymore. Because the son who had erased me from his life, who had told me I was dead to him, who had missed his father's funeral and didn't send so much as a card when I had cancer. That son needed me. And the reason why would reveal a truth so devastating. It would rewrite everything I thought I knew about the last 20 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really started. Not to that phone call, but to the day my son stopped being mine. My son Daniel was always sensitive. Even as a boy, he felt things deeply, too deeply, his father used to say. When he was 8, he found a dead bird in our backyard and held a funeral for it, complete with a eulogy he'd written himself. I loved that about him. I thought it meant he had a good heart. I was a high school English teacher. My husband, Richard, worked in insurance. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Daniel was our only child, so we poured everything into him. Maybe that was our first mistake. When Daniel went to college in Vermont, he studied philosophy and sociology. He came home for holidays those first 2 years, but I could feel him changing. He talked about systems of oppression, about generational wealth, about complicity. I didn't always understand, but I listened. Then he met Renee. She was a graduate student, 5 years older than him, working on her doctorate in social justice. I met her exactly once, during Parents' Weekend. She barely looked at me. When I tried to make conversation, she gave me this tight smile, and said something about how well-meaning middle-class people were often the biggest obstacles to real change. I changed the subject. After graduation, Daniel moved to Brooklyn to be near Renee. He got a job at a nonprofit. I called every week. Sometimes he answered. Sometimes he didn't. Our conversations grew shorter. He seemed irritated by my questions about his life. Then came Thanksgiving 2005. The last Thanksgiving. Daniel brought Renee home. I'd spent 3 days preparing. Turkey, stuffing, Daniel's favorite pecan pie. I wanted everything to be perfect. It started at dinner. Richard mentioned something about welfare reform. Just conversation. But Daniel's face went hard. He launched into a speech about systemic poverty, about how people like us, comfortable, secure people, couldn't possibly understand what it meant to struggle. Renee nodded along, adding comments about white privilege and economic violence. I tried to smooth things over. I said something about how we'd worked hard for what we had, how Richard's parents had been immigrants who started with nothing. But Daniel looked at me like I'd slapped him. You don't get it, he said, voice shaking. You'll never get it. You're so comfortable in your little bubble that you can't even see how you're part of the problem. Richard tried to intervene, but Daniel stood up. Renee stood with him. And then my son said words I can still hear perfectly. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending we're a family when your entire existence is built on exploitation and ignorance. I begged him to sit down to talk to me, but he and Renee were already getting their coats. At the door, he turned back one last time. I need space from you. From this. Maybe someday you'll understand why, but I'm not holding my breath. The door closed. Richard and I sat at that table with enough food for 8 people, and we didn't speak for an hour. I thought he'd call in a few days. But a week became a month. A month became 6 months. I sent emails. I left voicemails. I sent a birthday card to his apartment. It came back stamped return to sender. Richard tried reaching out through Daniel's workplace. They told him Daniel had requested that we not contact him there. When we drove to Brooklyn and knocked on his apartment door, no one answered. A neighbor told us she thought he'd moved. My son had vanished from my life. And I had no idea why. The years that followed were a fog of grief. I kept teaching because I needed something to hold on to. Richard became quieter, sadder. We didn't talk about Daniel much. It hurt too much. Richard died in 2018. A heart attack, sudden and brutal. As I planned his funeral, I debated whether to try to find Daniel one more time, but I couldn't bear another rejection. So I didn't. And I've carried the guilt of that decision ever since. I survived cancer in 2020. During treatment, when I was at my weakest, I thought about Daniel constantly. Wondered if he ever thought about me. Wondered if he'd care if I died. I was certain I'd never hear from him again. I'd accepted it. Made my peace with it. Or so I thought. Then came that phone call. 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in July. Mother. His voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. It's Daniel. I need your help. My heart was hammering. 20 years of silence, and this was how it broke. What's wrong? I managed to ask. It's Renee, he said, and I heard pure terror in his voice. She's been arrested. It's bad, Mom. It's really bad. And there's something else. Something I need to tell you. There was a long pause. I could hear his breathing. I have a daughter. Her name is Iris. She's 15. And right now she has nobody else. The world tilted. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. You have a daughter? I whispered. I have a granddaughter? Yes. And I need you to come to Brooklyn. Now. Tonight. Because Iris is sitting in a social services office. And if someone doesn't claim her by morning, they're putting her in the system. Everything I'd felt for 20 years, the hurt, the anger, the grief, collided with something else. Something stronger. I was on the road within an hour. 6 hours from Pennsylvania to Brooklyn, and every mile, I replayed that phone call. 15 years I'd been a grandmother without knowing it. Daniel was waiting outside the social services building. I almost didn't recognize him. He was thin, gaunt, with gray streaking his hair even though he was only 42. He looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Thank you for coming, he said. Not I'm sorry. Just thank you for coming. He explained it quickly. Renee had been arrested 3 days ago. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. She'd been working as director of a nonprofit that supposedly helped refugee families. Turns out she'd been siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars into offshore accounts. The FBI had been investigating for months. I didn't know, Daniel kept saying. You have to believe me. I didn't know what she was doing. The FBI believed him. He wasn't charged. But their entire life had imploded overnight. Their assets were frozen. Renee's lawyer had taken everything as a retainer. Their apartment was being seized. Daniel had lost his job. And then there was Iris. She won't talk to me, Daniel said, tears in his eyes. She blames me. She thinks I should have known, should have protected her mother. He took me inside. There, in a corner, sat a girl who looked exactly like Daniel had at 15. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, those same deep-set eyes. She looked up when we approached, and her expression was pure contempt. This is her? She asked Daniel. This is the grandmother you never mentioned? The one you said was dead. My stomach dropped. You told her I was dead? Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. It was easier than explaining. Iris laughed, harsh and bitter. Easier. That's his word for everything. I sat down next to her slowly. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I'm a stranger to you. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. We filled out paperwork for hours. Background checks, financial statements, home inspections to be scheduled. Daniel signed temporary custody over to me with shaking hands. Iris sat silent through all of it. When it was done, Daniel grabbed my arm. I know I don't deserve this. I know what I did to you. To Dad. But please take care of her. She's all I have. I looked at him and saw something I hadn't expected. Shame. Deep, corroding shame. We'll talk, I said. But not now. Right now, I need to focus on Iris. The drive back was silent. Iris stared out the window, her backpack clutched on her lap. Everything she'd managed to grab from the apartment. When we got to my house, I showed her to the guest room. She stood in the doorway, not entering. You don't have to pretend to care, she said. I know this is just obligation. That's not true, I said. Isn't it? Her eyes filled with tears. She was fighting. He told me you were dead. For my entire life, I thought I had no grandparents. And now I find out he lied because you weren't good enough for him. And you're just supposed to forgive him? You're supposed to rescue us after he threw you away? I didn't have an answer. Because she was right. I don't know if I'll forgive him, I said finally. But you didn't throw me away. You didn't do anything wrong. And whatever happens between your father and me, that has nothing to do with you and me. The first week was brutal. Iris barely spoke. She stayed in her room, only coming out for silent meals. I tried to give her space while also trying to connect. I bought her favorite foods, left books outside her door, asked gentle questions met with one-word answers. Daniel called every day. I didn't answer at first. But he left voicemails, long, rambling voicemails where he tried to explain himself. Finally, I listened to one. And what he said made me understand something terrible. I need to tell you why I cut you off, his voice said. When I met Renee, she told me I had been brainwashed by my upbringing to accept capitalism and inequality as normal. She said you and Dad had raised me to be complicit in systemic oppression. And she said if I really wanted to be good, to do good in the world, I had to purge myself of that conditioning. I had to cut ties with the people who represented that old way of thinking. My hands shook as I listened. It was like she rewrote my entire childhood. Things I remembered as happy became evidence of privilege I should be ashamed of. The house, the garden, your teaching job. She made it all seem sinister. And I believed her. I thought cutting you out was noble. I thought it was necessary. He was crying. It took 15 years for me to start questioning it. And even when I started to doubt, I couldn't admit it. Because if I was wrong about you, then I'd destroyed my relationship with my parents for nothing. I'd missed Dad's funeral for a lie. So I doubled down. And then the FBI showed up, and everything fell apart, and I couldn't hide from it anymore. The voicemail ended. My son hadn't hated me. He'd been manipulated. Slowly, carefully, over years. I didn't know if that made it better or worse. But that wasn't the worst of it. Because 3 weeks after Iris moved in, I found something in her backpack that changed everything I thought I understood about Renee, about Daniel, and about what had really been happening in that Brooklyn brownstone. Iris had started to open up. Slowly. We'd established a routine. She told me about her school, about friends she'd lost when the scandal broke. One afternoon, I was doing laundry. Iris had left her backpack on the bathroom floor. As I picked it up, something fell out. A journal. Leather-bound, worn. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. The first page was dated 5 years ago. Iris would have been 10. Mom says I can't tell anyone about the money. She says people wouldn't understand that we're doing important work. And sometimes you have to break small rules to fix big problems. Dad doesn't know about the account. Mom says it's safer that way. She says he wouldn't understand because he's too soft. My blood ran cold. I flipped through pages. Entry after entry. Iris describing how Renee would take her along on secret errands, where they'd move money, forge documents, meet with people who gave her cash. Iris writing about how special it made her feel, being trusted with her mother's real work. How Renee told her they were revolutionaries. And then about 2 years ago, the entries changed. I asked Mom if what we were doing was wrong. She got really angry. She said I was just like Dad, weak and brainwashed. She said if I ever told anyone, we'd all go to jail, and it would be my fault. I don't want to go to jail. But I also don't want to lie anymore. The most recent entry was from the night of the arrest. The FBI just took Mom. Dad is crying. I'm not. I'm relieved. Is that terrible? But I'm also terrified because I knew. For 5 years I knew what she was doing, and I said nothing. Does that make me guilty too? This child, my granddaughter, had been carrying this secret, this guilt for years. And she'd had no one to tell. I found Iris in the garden. When she saw me holding the journal, her face went white. I wasn't snooping, I said quickly. It fell out. And I read some of it. I'm sorry. She stood up, tense. Are you going to turn me in? Turn you in? Iris, you were a child. You were being manipulated. I knew, she shouted. I knew what she was doing and I didn't stop it. All those refugees, I knew they were being stolen from, and I didn't say anything. She was crying now, really crying. I crossed to her and pulled her into my arms. She resisted, then collapsed against me. You were 10 years old, I said fiercely. She was your mother. She told you it was right. She threatened you. You were a victim, Iris. Not a criminal. But I should have told someone, she sobbed. Your mother should never have put you in that position, I said. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me? None of it. We stayed like that for a long time, under the oak tree, while she cried out years of guilt. That night, I called Daniel. Told him what I'd found. There was a long silence. I didn't know, he said finally. God, Margaret, I didn't know she'd involved Iris. How could you let this happen? I asked. How could you be so blind? I don't know, he said broken. I've been asking myself that for weeks. I keep looking for signs I missed. And they were there. They were always there. I'd committed so hard to believing in Renee, in believing I'd made the right choice cutting you out, that I couldn't let myself see the truth. You did waste 20 years, I said. And I lost 20 years with you. And Richard died never knowing if his son thought about him. And Iris grew up without a grandmother because you were too stubborn to admit you might have been wrong. I know, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry. The word I'd wanted for 2 decades. And now that I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. But there was one more revelation coming. One more piece of the puzzle. And when I found it, it would make me question everything. Even whether Daniel deserved my forgiveness at all. A month passed. Iris was doing better. She'd started therapy. She was sleeping through the night. Daniel had found a job and was slowly rebuilding. He'd asked to visit. I'd said yes. He arrived on a Saturday. When he walked through the door, Iris stared at him, then to my surprise hugged him. I don't forgive you for lying to me, she said. But I know Mom messed with your head. She messed with mine too. We spent the afternoon together, navigating this strange new configuration. Daniel and I were careful with each other. Too much history, too much hurt. In the evening, after Iris went to her room, Daniel and I sat on the porch. I need to tell you something, he said finally. Something I've never told anyone. I waited. 3 years ago, I tried to leave Renee. His voice was flat. I'd started to see what she was. How controlling. How she'd isolated me. I told her I wanted space. That maybe we should separate. He paused, hands clenched. She told me if I left, she'd make sure I never saw Iris again. She said she'd tell everyone I was abusive. That she had friends who would back her up. That she'd destroy my reputation and take my daughter. And I believed her. So I stayed. I felt something crack open in my chest. Not anger. Pity. I'm not telling you this to make excuses, he said quickly. What I did to you and Dad was wrong. But I need you to understand. I've been trapped for a long time. We sat in silence as the sun set. I found something of your father's, I said finally. After he died. Letters he'd written to you but never sent. Dozens of them. He didn't mail them because he didn't know where you were. But he wrote them anyway. He told you about his life, about how much he loved you. How much he missed you. Daniel was crying silently. I'll give them to you, I said. But I need you to understand something. Your father died believing his son hated him. And that's something I have to live with every day. That's something you have to live with too. I know, he whispered. And I don't know if I can forgive you for that. I continued. Not fully. Maybe not ever. But Iris needs us to try. So I'm willing to try. For her sake. The next morning, I gave him the letters. He read them in the garden. And when he came back inside, his face was ravaged with grief. But also something like peace. Months passed. Daniel got an apartment nearby. He saw Iris every weekend. They were rebuilding their relationship. He'd asked about family therapy. I'd agreed. Iris was thriving. She'd enrolled in the local high school and made friends. She'd joined the art club. She laughed now, real, genuine laughter. And me? I was learning to be a grandmother. Learning that it's possible to love someone you've only known for months with fierce intensity. Learning that family can be rebuilt, even from rubble. But there was one more thing I needed to decide. Because buried in those journal entries, in Iris's childish descriptions of her secret errands with Renee, was a detail that had stuck with me. A name Renee had mentioned, telling Iris that he'll never know what we're really doing. Daniel. She'd said Daniel would never know. Renee hadn't just kept the embezzlement from Daniel. She'd specifically, deliberately ensured he remained ignorant. She'd told Iris he was too soft, that he wouldn't understand, that he had to be kept in the dark. Which meant that for all those years Daniel thought he was making a choice. Choosing Renee's ideology over his parents. He'd actually been a puppet. Renee had cut him off from us not because of philosophical differences, but because she needed him isolated, dependent, unable to turn to anyone who might see through her. She'd weaponized his guilt and his desire to be good, and she'd used it to control every aspect of his life. I had to decide. Did I tell him this? Did I give him this final, crushing revelation? Or did I let him keep believing he'd had agency? In the end I told him. Because he deserved the truth. We were in my living room. Iris was at school. I showed him the journal entry. Watched his face as he read it. She planned it, he whispered. She planned all of it. Cutting you off. Isolating me. Making me think it was my choice. Yes, I said. He sat there for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I don't know who I am. If everything I've believed about myself for 20 years was a lie, then who am I? You're my son, I said. That's real. Your love for Iris is real. Your regret is real. The person you choose to be from this moment forward, that's real. He looked at me, and I saw the little boy who'd held a funeral for a bird. The sensitive child who felt things too deeply. He was still in there. Can you really forgive me? He asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, I said honestly. You hurt me. You hurt your father. Those are facts. But I also see that you were hurt too. That you were a victim of something insidious. So maybe it's not about forgiveness. Maybe it's about choosing to move forward anyway. Choosing to build something new. And you're willing to do that? Yes, I said. For you. For Iris. For the family we can still be. 3 months later, we had Thanksgiving at my house. The first in 20 years that included my son. Iris helped me cook. She made stuffing from a recipe she found online, and it was terrible, but we ate it anyway and laughed. Daniel brought wine and flowers. We set the table together. The three of us. During dinner, Daniel raised his glass. I want to say something. To my mother. Margaret. Mom. He paused. I wasted 20 years. 20 years I can never get back. And I'm going to carry that regret for the rest of my life. But you gave me something I didn't deserve. You gave me a chance to be your son again. And I'm grateful. More grateful than I can ever express. I felt tears on my cheeks. Iris was crying too. I'm grateful too, Iris said. For both of you. For giving me a real family. Finally. We clinked glasses. We ate too much pie. We argued playfully about what to watch on TV. We were, for that moment, what we'd never been before. A family. I won't pretend it's perfect. Daniel and I still have hard days. Days where the weight of those lost years sits between us like a wall. Days where I look at him and feel the ache of all the milestones I missed. But Iris is thriving. She calls me grandma now. She talks about college. She's learning to trust again. And when I see her smile, really smile without shadows, I think maybe the 20 years weren't wasted after all. Maybe they led to this. Renee is serving 12 years in federal prison. Daniel doesn't take Iris to visit. Iris says maybe someday but not now. And me? I'm learning that some wounds don't heal completely. They scar. But scars are proof that you survived something. My son called me mother, again after 20 years of silence. And even though everything that came after was messy and painful and complicated, I'm glad he called. Because I got my son back. I got a granddaughter I never knew existed. And I got a second chance at something I thought was gone forever. Love, it turns out, is more resilient than we give it credit for. It can survive 20 years of silence. It can survive manipulation and lies and devastating betrayals. As long as someone is brave enough to pick up the phone at 2 in the morning and say the word that starts everything over. If this story spoke to your heart, don't let it fade. Subscribe to The Silent Parents. where every emotion finds a home.